Welcome to another exciting webinar with Rabbi Pinchas Winston. I noticed, Rabbi Winston, that you have a book on Hanukkah, which is coming up shortly in a couple weeks. It's called The Light of 36, and obviously 36 has to do with the 36 candles of Hanukkah. But we just happened to light 36 candles because we added every day we add another candle, which obviously comes in the end to the number 36. Why is the number 36 so central to the holiday of Hanukkah itself?
The truth is, growing up, I never even heard about the whole idea, and I was actually amazed to find out about it. And I had the opportunity to work with somebody once on a project that exposed me to it the first time. And once I began to see what this idea was about and how essential it was, I began to do more research into it. Eventually, I wrote this book called The Light of 36. And for those who know, my website, as you very kindly usually mention at some point in time, is called 36.org because of this very reason. This light is so central. And we'll talk about that a bit, in tonight's class as well, God willing. But the basic idea is that even though it looks like it's incidental that we just happen to light 36 candles over the course of 8 days, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 happens to equal 36. The reality is that it's the other way around. That 36 is the number, and obviously there's it's interesting the way it happened to be an 8-day holiday, but it didn't have to be an 8-day holiday, you have to understand, because when we first found the oil back in the time of the Second Temple, the Chashmonaim found the oil. They found 1 jar of oil. It was enough to burn for 1 day, and had it just burned for 1 day, so fine. And that could have been a 1-day holiday. Obviously, God wanted it to be an 8-day holiday, and the rabbis understood what was going on. But the essential message is that there's a very special light that God made back at the beginning of creation. We see this right in the Chumash. It says to God to let there be light, and there was light. And we know that light was not the light of the sun and the moon and the stars, because the Torah itself tells you that's not till the 4th day. They may have been created on the 1st day, but they're not put into their orbits, into wherever they're going to go and illuminate the world until the 4th day. And they certainly weren't using incandescent light bulbs back at that time, or fluorescent, or all the different forms of light we have today. It was a special light. And it says after that in the 4th verse, Rashi, the commentator, brings it down and explains that this light was hidden. And we know that this light is not hidden. The light that we have in this room is not hidden. The sun, the moon, the stars only get hidden because of where they are in the universe, in comparison to the earth. But that light's available. And when Rashi explains why, he's actually quoting the Talmud, who says that God looked ahead and saw history and saw that there are going to be evil people in history who would abuse this light. So therefore he hid it. Hence the name, or Hagenuz, the hidden light of creation. And the sun, everybody uses that. Whether a person's good, person's bad, doesn't make a difference. You want to use a light bulb, you want to use a lamp, you just flick the switch on. They don't ask you, the light doesn't say, hey, are you a good guy or are you a bad guy, right? You just flick the switch on. If you paid your bill, then you get electricity. So then which light are we talking about? Which light did God hide? And where did he hide it, for that matter? So this is what the book is basically about. It's about this particular light that is the basis of Hanukkah. And also another kind of myth or misunderstanding is that people think that because Hanukkah came along like the 4th millennium and the rabbis were the one who established it, it's only a rabbinical holiday, and therefore it doesn't have much meaning, it doesn't hold much weight, because Pesach, Passover, is in the Torah. It's about leaving Mitzrayim. And then you have Shavuos, about the giving of Torah, and Sukkot, and all these are Torah holidays, and Purim and Hanukkah are rabbinic in origin. So therefore they're just commemorations. Well, that's not true. It turns out that really Hanukkah is the undercurrent of history, what the basis of Hanukkah, the light that it gives off by the menorah, and just the days itself that led to the miraculous, victory of the Chashmonaim over the much larger Greek army, has to do with this light. And everything miraculous in history has to do with this light. In fact, the story of Yaakov Avinu, going back for the small little jar that led to his confrontation with the angel of Esav, has to do with this oil, because it was inside the jar that he went back for. And it's just a thread running through history. But the most important part of it, this light, is that somebody who can access it And you can only do that if you have the proper character traits and you develop yourself in the appropriate way. Who can access this light becomes a master of miracles. You can actually learn to control miracles. I don't know, it's to the same degree you find in the Talmud, and certainly not the same degree you find in Tanakh. But nonetheless, miracles are alive and well, and they happen today as well. People talk about miracles all the time. There are books being written about the many miracles. But what do we mean by that? Well, it was a miracle, meaning that something amazing happened. It probably shouldn't have happened, but it happened at the right time in the right way. And but is it a miracle like the miracle of Hanukkah? Well, the truth is yes. The difference is, though, is that for the most part, we're kind of like passive in the whole miracle process, meaning that we hope for a miracle, we pray for a miracle when we need them, and whether we get them or not, that remains to be seen. Some people do, some people don't. What's the criteria to make sure that a miracle happens? It has to do with this light. So this book is appropriately called The Light of 36, accessing the hidden light of creation on a daily basis. And it tells us what the light's about, where it is, how it runs through history, how Hanukkah is really a concept that goes back to the beginning of creation. It just took 3,000 some odd years to bring it out and to make it an official holiday, but it is the theme of history. And if a person understands this, then they become empowered in a very, very amazing way. And that's,
so I just picked up the book
myself.
And so I'm not sure exactly what's written inside, but when you gave that introduction, my first thoughts are hidden light that's physical. There are many different types of light that are hidden in the physical spectrum of light that we know of today. When you take a prism, you're able to take white light and make it into a rainbow, which we know that the rainbow has God's presence, the Shekhinah, in it. And that's also part of the physical hiddenness of light. So I don't know if you mentioned that in the book. And then my other thought is that the first thing that comes out to my mind when I hear 36 is the famous legend of the Lamed Vav Tzadikim, the 36 hidden righteous men in every generation. Again, I'm not sure if it's written in your book either, but I'm sure there's a connection between these things. Would you like to address those?
Well, the rainbow I don't address in the book itself, because the truth is, that's an important point to bring out. That is a physical light, and you're right. Physical lights can be hidden because of our physical limitations to see them, unless we have some type of assistance, technology to help us to look at it. But the Or HaGenuz, the hidden light of creation, clearly is a spiritual light, not a physical light. So, for example, the Talmud says that with this light, Adam HaRishon, the first man, was able to see from one end of the world until the other end of the world without a telescope, without any type of physical technological assistance. There's no physical light that allows a person to do that today or ever if they don't have something to amplify their vision to be able to see further. Glasses, this light was, just having it. Even, for example, when Avraham was shown the land of Israel, and God says, look, north, south, east, west, and the whole thing. So the Or Chaim explains right there, commenting on that verse, he didn't go anywhere. The verse itself says, from this place. Take a look from this place. Why does it mention from this place? So he says, because God gave Avraham a panoramic view of the entire land of Israel, and he didn't even have to turn his head. So how do you do that? Where does that take place? So we know we have physical eyes, but we also have something called the mind's eye. And the mind's eye, interesting enough, as much as it's not physical, it's just our perspective on things shows us a lot more than our physical eyes can see because they're very limited. Our physical eyes are just more like windows that get the information interpreted in the back of the brain. But the Or HaGenuz, the hidden light of creation, is in fact a totally spiritual light with tremendous physical ramifications. One of which, for example, are the Tzaddikim, the 36, we call it Lamed Vavniks, the 36 Tzaddikim in every generation, because they access this light. Not only this, as we mentioned before, the 36 candles of Hanukkah, somehow they are a portal to this light as well, if you know how to access it, but the book discusses that, right? And then you also have 36 tractates in the Babylonian Talmud, because it says in the Midrash Tanchuma, quoting the verse from Yeshaya, right, Isaiah the prophet, that the nation that walks through the darkness will see the great light. So the Medrash asked the great light we know we're talking about. That's the Or HaGenuz. That's that fantastic light that God made at the beginning. But what's the darkness? So the Medrash says that's the Babylonian Talmud. That's the Talmud. Why is it called darkness? This is Torah light because it's so hard to learn. You have to go into it. But for the person who takes the time and makes the effort to work their way through it and understand it, the reward is going to be a vision from one end of the world unto the other end of the world, not with the physical eyes, but in the mind. Because what you'll understand and what you'll be able to grasp about life will be universal, be global in the full sense. And the fourth place it says that the light is hidden is in the 36 hours of Shabbos. Now you'll tell me there's only 24 hours of Shabbos, 24 and a half, 25, depends upon how long you go with it. But technically speaking, a day is 24 hours long. But it says that this light shone for Adam Harishon in Gan Eden, in paradise, for the 12 hours of Erev Shabbos, 12 hours before in advance of Shabbos, and the 24 hours of Shabbos before God finally hid it away, for people to go looking for it, to actually access it through life and Torah and things like that. But these are the four places it's hidden away. And if a person understands how to use these things to access the light, it transforms your life completely. And
you mentioned Avram Avinu and him and Abraham being able to see from one side of Eretz Yisrael to the other. The other person that was also told about was Moshe Rabbeinu. Before he passed away, he was brought up to the mountain, and he wasn't able to come into the land of Israel, but he was able to see from one end to the other. And speaking of light, that also is mentioned by him as well, that when he came down from Mount Sinai, a great light shone from his face, and he had to cover it up because people couldn't look at him directly, having this light that was showing, that was emanating from his face.
Right, and that's all to do with this light. In fact, early in his career, when he was still a Egyptian prince, and he was out in the fields, the Torah reports right at the beginning that he saw an Egyptian beating a Jew, and he took the situation into hand, and he killed the Egyptian using one of God's divine names. And before he did that, it says he looked kol v'kol, this way and that way. Now, the obvious explanation of these words, this way and that way, is to see anyone watching. I don't want to get caught doing this. If Pharaoh finds out I'm killing one of his men, I'll be in big trouble. So he looks this way and that way. But Rashi says something very interesting, very different. He said he looked into the Egyptians' past and he looked into the Egyptians' future to see if he had done anything merit-worthy in the past, or if anybody merit-worthy would come from the future before he would exercise this judgment on this Egyptian. And when he saw that there was no significance to this Egyptian's life, but he was guilty of hurting somebody unnecessarily, among other things he had done wrong, this Egyptian, so then he was able to kill him. Now, how do you do that? How do you look into a person's past if you don't know them from the past? And how do you look into their future if you're not a prophet? So obviously he had this ability to be able to see beyond the physical reality with this light. And how do we know that? So Kabbalah explains he was born with this light. In fact, it says that when he was born, that the according to the Talmud, the room filled up with light. But again, physical light? No, it's not physical. It's a spiritual light. And that's why he was born 36 years after the exile officially began. Because he came to free the Jewish people, and Kabbalah explains that every redemption and the giving of Torah and every miracle always happens with this light, with an access to this light and an illumination, an emanation of this light. And the final redemption, when Mashiach finally comes, will be with this light. It will come out full blast, and that's why the prophet ends up by saying, he says, on that day, God will be one and his name will be one. I mean, everybody's going to believe in God? Yeah, everyone's going to believe in God. Atheists too? Absolutely. Agnostic, atheists, they're all going to believe. Why? What's going to change then that all of a sudden, the revelation of this light is going to open the minds of everybody and just wash away all doubt. And not just that, but it will eliminate all evil, because it's very hard to do evil when you can see the waste in it and the consequence of it. So this light of Hanukkah is completely central to the rectification of all of mankind in all history. And it's in one little holiday that comes and goes. We don't even have a major meal like we do on Purim, just like the menorah. But that in itself tells you a lot. It comes in the dead of winter, in darkness, to illuminate, to give off light to the rest of the world. And unfortunately, too many people don't understand the background to the holiday. Giving. I love latkes. Sufgan yet a little bit, a little fattening in that respect, but luck is too, I guess. But it's just a backdrop. Hanukkah is about rectifying, fixing everything up with this light, and developing yourself in such a way that you can be a receptacle for this light, to bring it to you and share it with the world. In that respect, finally put the world back on track in the direction it's supposed to go.
Getting back to that physical light, and we'll have to move on from here, but you just reminded me of the famous theory of relativity of Einstein, which connects light to actual time. So when you're speaking about Moshe Rabbeinu, that he has this special light, and he's also able to see the past and the future, I wonder if there's any connection there between the physics of it, and the fact that the speed of light is related to time, as Einstein had written about. Anyways, we want to go on to what we're supposed to discuss this evening. So I will let you take over from here, and I'll leave you with Rabbi Winston. We'll meet afterwards.
Okay, thank you. So actually, that was a good introduction to tonight's class. We are now in the month of Kislev. This is the month of Hanukkah, month of Kislev. And as it's known, the names of the months, the Jewish months, they weren't ours. We didn't make them up. We picked them up when we were in the Babylonian exile. In the Torah, they were by numbers. Tishrei is called the 7th month, and we count from Nisan as the first, is the Rosh Hashanah of the months. It's the first month, and then Iyar is the second month, and Sivan the third month, and we go from there basically through the rest of the year. Eventually, we gave the names of the months when after we came back or during the Babylonian exile. I don't know if they're exactly the same as they were then, or we adjusted them, but it's a very interesting thing. A lot of times that we spoke about Mar Cheshvan, I don't know if we spoke about it here, but Mar Cheshvan, the month that we just finished up, and how it tells us a lot about the opportunity of the time and what's going on historically. But Kislev, I think, is very fascinatingly a tremendous indication of the month itself, and the whole concept of Hanukkah comes to teach us, and what we're here to be able to be impacted by through this period of time, because the entire month is really Hanukkah based, starting from Rosh Chodesh Kislev. In fact, the Zohar says that the first 24 days of Kislev, starting from Rosh Chodesh until right before Hanukkah, correspond to the 24 letters of the words Baruch Shem Kavod Machuso Le'olam Ve'ed, which is the second verse of the Shema, which translates as "Blessed be the name of His glorious name forever." Blessed be His glorious name forever. This is of His kingdom forever. Yeah. So this is the second verse we say in the Shema, and this first, the Shema Yisrael Hashem Echad is the first verse. And for those who are unfamiliar, the origin of these, there's really two origins of these two verses, aside from the fact that Torah itself mentions it. But in the Medrash, it says that Yaakov Avinu wanted to reveal the end of days to his sons, meaning that he wanted to show them what was going to unfold so they could recognize the events of history for what they were and see how they were leading towards some messianic process, as opposed to the way we approach it. We don't see what's coming. We don't understand what's here. Only after the fact, maybe we could see what it was meant to do. But this would have been clues to history to know how to use the months. And right before he died, he wanted to pass on this very important information that would guide us through history. Unfortunately, it says he lost the prophecy. And when he lost the prophecy, he thought that maybe somebody was unfitting to be able to hear it. So he turned to his sons and said to them, "Is anybody here not okay, not spiritually up to par?" And they come back and they say, "Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad." And the more it explains, meaning that just like God is one in your heart, God is also one in our heart too. Now the question is, ask that question. He only asked, "Is everyone spiritually okay?" But so they say, "Yeah, God's real to us. God is one. God is one." That's the whole point. So he comes back and he says, "Baruch Shem Kavod Machuso Le'olam Ve'ed." And from the Talmud, it sounds as if he's saying, "Oh, okay, so everything's okay. you said that, I say this. We can assume they're all beseder, everything's fine. And for some reason, we lost the prophecy, who knows why. But according to the Zohar, it's not true. According to the Zohar, that the Shema has 25 letters, and Yaakov wanted to give a 25th letter also to Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Le'olam Ve'ed, but he didn't, because he understood that that level of unity, sublime divine unity, where everybody believes in God and nobody has questions or doubts about his existence, obviously didn't exist yet in his time, not even amongst his family completely. So therefore he fell short by one letter to say, you're almost there, but not completely there. So the Zohar says that the 24 letters of that phrase, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Le'olam Ve'ed, correspond to the first 24 days of Kislev. And the Shema, which has 25 letters, corresponds to the 25th day of Kislev, which of course is the first day of Hanukkah. So, this tells you that don't just show up for Hanukkah on the 25th or the 24th of Kislev and, I got my menorah, I got my oil, let's move, let's have some latkes now. So whatever we're going to have. No, from Rosh Chodesh Kislev, and the truth is, as we spoke about before in the past, that even from Cheshvan and really from Simchas Torah, Shmini Atzeres, Rosh Hashanah, we can go back all the way back. It's all been a preparation from since last Chanukah, for this Chanukah, but certainly from Rosh Chodesh Kislev. That's what the Zohar is telling us. So this month is a Chanukah month, and very messianic, because Chanukah, the light of Chanukah. You know why we have holidays? We have holidays because they correspond to lights that don't belong in our period of history. The light that God used to free the Jews from Egypt obviously didn't belong there at that time, because otherwise we would have got out of Egypt a long time ago. There would be no Egypt in the first place. The fact that we were enslaved meant this light did not shine on a regular basis. And to leave Egypt, God opened a spiritual portal. The light came into the world, and that caused all the plagues and whatever was necessary to free the Jewish people. The same thing too is true about the giving of Torah. That, a special moment. And Sukkot too. And Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, these are all special lights that correspond to future periods of history that we have yet to live, but we will one day, God willing, in the future. And that's why you have a specific holiday, because it's like the door opens for 7 days or 8 days, whatever the case may be. And then it shuts again. So you can maintain that access by carrying on what you did to during that time, or we simply lose it for the year and hopefully we grew something in the meantime. So if that light belongs to a specific period and we reach that specific period, you no longer require the holiday anymore. So the first holiday to go will be Hanukkah, because once the Messianic era begins, every day is going to be Hanukkah. You won't need a specific day to access that light, because every day that light will shine. So every year, from the 25th day of Kislev for 8 days, we are accessing the light of Mashiach. And if a person understands how to do that, and how to use it, they can grow tremendously and accomplish a lot in the course of 8 days that they can't accomplish the rest of the year. The name of the month, interesting enough, really alludes to the whole idea, because Kislev is made up of 2 parts. There's a Chof Samach and there's a Lamed Vav. Now the Lamed Vav, after our little introduction, should be clearer now, because Lamed Vav is the way you write the number 36. Lamed is 30, the Vav is 6, combined 36. That's why they're called the Lamed Vavniks. The 36 Tzaddikim are called the Lamed Vavniks. They are from that category. So the second part of the month certainly is alluding to the Or HaGenuz, the hidden light of creation that's shown for 36 hours in the Garden of Eden before being hidden. And the 36 candles bring that light back into reality. So that's the Lamed Vav of Kislev. What's the Chav Samach of Kislev? Well, just off the bat, Chav Samach, the first word that comes to my mind, at least, is kisui. A kisu is a covering, right? Cover something up. But even more accurately, Chav Samach actually is even more profound. Why? Because if you open the Chumash and you go to Parshas B'Shalach That's the time that the Jewish people are standing by the Red Sea, right, or the Reed Sea, the Yam Suf, and the great miracle of splitting the sea takes place. Water, walls of water, the Jews go across, and the Egyptians make the fatal mistake of following them into the sea, and the water back again. The Jews get out, the Egyptians get drowned, and we sing a tremendous song of praise to God because of this fantastic, amazing miracle. And everything's looking good for a day or two until we complain once again. No more food, no more bread. So God gives us man. And everything's looking good for a day or two until we finally complain about the water. And there's no water. You bring us all the way out. I mean, all the miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle. Fantastic, amazing miracles beyond comprehension. And by the way, we're thirsty. There's no water. They complain. So what happens? Vayavu Amalek. The Torah says we are attacked for the first time by our nemesis and antithesis, the people of Amalek, who were a nomadic people who didn't even live there. They traveled a long distance at their own expense to come and attack the Jewish people. What does that tell you about the people of Amalek? Well, it gets God angry enough that he declares war against them forever until they're finally eradicated completely from the world. Esav, you can defeat him, but you don't have to destroy everything that belongs to Esav. Right? Yishmael, maybe go to war, maybe fight war, but if he's being nice to us, we don't have a mitzvah to eradicate them. Only Amalek, and not just Amalek, but every last, you can't even keep a belt, a shoe that belonged to Amalek. If the last Amaleki has been killed, wiped from the world, then you can't even have anything left over. No remembrance, because he is such an enemy of truth and the Jewish people. The numerical value of his name, Amalek, Ayin Mem Lamed Kuf, is 240. And the rabbis point out that that's the same gematria, the same numerical value of the word Safek, Samech Pei Kuf, 240, which means doubt. Because Amalek comes to create doubt in the minds of men in the reality of God, and after that, in belief in his divine providence. He doesn't want you to believe in God. He doesn't want you to think that God runs the world, that God's alive and well and still operating in history. He doesn't want that, because then you'll be immoral. He doesn't want you to be moral. He wants to eat, drink, and be merry, and have a good time. That's Amalek. So at the end of Parshas B'Shalach, interesting enough, when God, finally declares that he's the enemy for all time, Moshe Rabbeinu himself is the one who speaks it out. So he says that God takes an oath, and he says, Yad al Keska, that his hand is on the throne of God, because in Judaism, to give an oath weight, that it should be strong and the person should be afraid to break it, you're supposed to hold a holy object. Sefer Torah is extremely holy, or maybe even a pair of tefillin. In Abraham's time, there was no such thing yet. So there, the most holy thing to him was his bris milah, the covenant he made with God. So therefore, Eliezer, when taking his oath, hold on to the leg of Abraham, symbolizing that he is, in a sense, connected to this bris milah to give it weight, that he won't break the oath. So what does God hold on to when he's taking an oath? So it says, onto his throne. The only problem is that the word throne in Hebrew is kisei. It's like a chair. It's like kisei. But the Torah does not write kisei. It only writes the word case. Chof samach. Chof samach. That's all, right? Chof samach. Missing the aleph. And the name of God, which is Yud Kei Vav Kei, is only written Yud Kei. So Rashi, of course, picks up on this. And he asks the question, says, hey, wait a second. What's this case and not kisei? And what is this Yud Kei as opposed to Yud Kei Vav Kei? So Rashi explains. He says, this is telling you that God says that as long as Amalek is alive in this world and functioning, my throne is not complete, hence the missing aleph. It's only a case as opposed to kisei. And not just that, but my name is divided. Yud Kei and Vav Kei. The Vav Kei is missing. Yud Kei is but it's the Amalek divides the name of God. Well, how can Amalek divide the name of God? God's so holy and his name is so holy. How can Amalek do that? Well, he doesn't actually divide the name of God. What he does instead is he makes it in people's minds as if it is divided. And how does he do that? Well, the Yud K corresponds to the supernatural reality of God, which is higher up. And the Vav K corresponds to the more hidden aspect of God that works, for example, through nature. People believe in nature. Does nature really exist? Not really. All nature is consistent divine providence. It's God making the sun rise every single day. But we call, birth seems so natural birth, no such thing as a natural birth. There is maybe out of the hospital birth, but this a birth's a miracle because everything's a miracle. So then why is this not called a miracle? Because it happens all the time. Makes it less of a miracle only to us in our minds. So what Amalek likes to do, however, for example, the Holocaust, as a story I was told by somebody who actually survived the Holocaust. He sent me his manuscript, and I read it, and as much as I was able to read, it was very hard to read because it was hard to read. And he was talking about he was there witnessing one day in the concentration camps when they were all lined up for roll call, and the commandant came out, sadistic person, clearly, and he walked up to someone who I guess he assumed was a rabbi, probably didn't have a beard anymore, but an older person, and he said to the rabbi in German, he said, "Herr Rabbi, where's your God now?" Right? I mean, here we are. We're the ones in control. We can do whatever we want to you, seemingly with impunity. I'm not worried about anything, right? And seems like a good proof that your God doesn't exist. This rabbi was unfazed. He said, still there, still running the world, still working right through you for whatever reason. I don't necessarily understand why all this is necessary, and it's certainly extremely, extremely painful and tragic. But don't get the wrong idea. God is as live as well as ever, running the world as always. And just because your mind is too small to grasp that, he didn't say it. I'm putting this into his response. Don't think that it's that he's not here. And this commandant got so furious he literally kicked this person to death. That's what this person wrote in his book on the spot. Harsh, but that's what he wants to do. That's what Amalek loves to do. He loves to create doubt in the minds of people as to the existence of God, and that's why the Aleph is missing. Because if you look in Parshas Vayikra, later on, the very first word Vayikra has is missing the Aleph. The word is spelled Vav Yud Kuf Reish Aleph. But if you look in a Sefer Torah and maybe some Chamashim, the Aleph at the end of the word is written very small. So the word looks like Vayikar with an Aleph. Again, Rashi picks up on this and explains. Because this is the difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and Bilam, he says. Bilam was an evil person, an evil prophet, someone who was working against God and the Jewish people, trying to curse us against God's will. And so God just happens to show up. Yikar is the word mikra, means like just happens to be. It's like happen chance. It's not like a thing that's a fixed reality. But by Moshe, Vikra, he calls him, he invites him. He has a relationship with God. It's a word of endearment. One little aleph at the end of the word, the same aleph missing from the word kisei over there. So this is really what the case stands for. Even more interesting, or as interesting, is the fact that the Gemara says there are three traits by which you can sum a person up. Three specific traits. Now the truth is there's lots of traits, many traits. Today psychology books identify 10, 15, 20 traits a person has, gives them letters and this thing and make a whole combination. But the Gemara is focused on only three traits. It says kiso, kaso, vakoso. I don't remember exactly that's the order, but those are the three things. Kiso means his wallet, and kaso means his anger, and koso means his cup. What does it mean? It means that you can tell if a person believes in God by how they are with money. If a person's stingy because they believe that they're the ones who make their money, they work hard to make their money, and it belongs completely to them, so that they'll show up, that they don't really believe that God is the one who blesses them with what they have. If the person's generous, it means that they understand it's a gift that God gives to them, and therefore it's their right to help others with that money or use it to make people feel better about their lives because they know that God will give them what they need. Kaso, anger. The Talmud says that a person who loses their temper is like somebody who worships idols. Why is that? Because why am I getting angry? There I am in the shopping store and some guy elbows me or some guy nicks the back of my car in the street. Somehow he backs out, boom, the back of my car. I come out, I get angry at this person. How could you, why won't you look where you're going? But the reality is that could not happen if God did not decide in heaven that this had to happen to me right now. Why? I don't know yet. To figure that one out. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But it came from God. Now, if this person was being irresponsible, I have an obligation to say to him, listen, you have to be more careful. You back out and, that's a lot of damage. And what's your insurance company name? All that stuff remains the same. And sometimes, for example, you have to show temper, anger to people, not temper, but anger, to imprint upon people or children specifically the importance of a situation. But lose your temper? I mean, I wish I could follow that advice myself personally, but lose your temper? No. Why? Because it came from God. And if I'm getting angry, like sincerely angry, it's because I'm feeling an injustice. And if I'm feeling an injustice, I'm saying that God himself doesn't agree with this. Because let's say someone nicked my car, banged my car, put a dent in it, and I tell this person, you have done a terrible thing, and a voice comes down from heaven and says, I arranged that. I did that to you. He's just the vehicle, literally, to carry it out. Who is that? It's God speaking. What am I going to say? Still, it's wrong. Still, it's unjust. No. If God says it has to happen, it's justice. Again, I have responsibility to right the wrongs that I can, but to act like it's an injustice, no. I have to act as if this administered mine from heaven. So if I lose my temper, I have a temper issue, then it means I have to work on that because it goes against Torah philosophy. And the last one is koso. How does a person act when they're inebriated? First of all, do they get drunk? Because that's also a way to tell what kind of person a person is. And once they do get drunk, what are they like? They lose themselves? I mean, can a person ever get to the point where they lose themselves like that? If a person really has fear of God and believes in truth and all that, where they can embarrass and shame themselves or embarrass and shame other people, these are the three ways. But what's interesting is that there are many different traits that can tell what a person is like. Why these three specifically? Well, off the bat, we see a similarity, right? Chav samach, chav samach, chav samach. They all share that root, this hidingness, right? Chav samach. But if you look at the letters that they don't have in common, well, one's a yud, one's an ayin, and one's a vav. And if you add them up, right, ayin is 70, right, and you have, so ayin is 70, and you have the yud, which is 80, and then you have the vav, which is 86. It's interesting because the other word, one of the other words in the world of words that has a gematria of 86 is the name Elohim, God's name, but not any name. It's the name of God when he works in creation through nature. In fact, the word hateva, which means the nature, has the same gematria as Elohim. It's the hidden hand of God. It's the Vav K of the Yud K Vav K that people seem to overlook. So what it's really telling you at the root of these things, these three traits, why a person has the wrong approach to life is because they tend to relate to God on the level of Elohim, if at all, as opposed to the Yud K, which is the revealed hand of God in life, associated with the Lam Vav, the revelation of the Or HaGenuz, the hidden life creation. So in the name Kislev, it's amazing. It tells you off the bat what the problem is. The light is hidden. And therefore, the hand of God is hidden. And therefore, the task is to unhide it, to reveal it. I mean, this is what the prophet tells the Jewish people. You were taken out of Egypt to be Or LaGoyim, to be a light unto the nations. First, be a light unto yourselves, and then be a light unto nations. What light are we talking about? I mean, listen, Einstein came up with the E equals MC squared. Okay, that's certainly an equation of light and how we know, but it's talking about that. Well, maybe a little bit, just a little bit. But that equation did not necessarily make mankind more moral. That equation did not necessarily, if at all, turn people back to God, reveal the truth about life and creation as a whole. It helped, technologically perhaps, it helped to understand how the world was made and perhaps appreciate the miracle of creation a little bit more. But many, many, many scientists know that equation and what it means and are working with it in one way, one form or another, who do not believe in God and don't feel compelled to believe in God. So is that the light we're talking about? No. That's not the light. The light we're talking about is the supernal light that God made back at the beginning. But he hid it. And if he hid it, then how are we supposed to access it? How are we supposed to find it? So the truth is, and we'll talk a bit, hopefully, about this a bit more, God willing, as Hanukkah approaches, but the truth is, it's actually right there in one of the laws of Hanukkah, one of the main laws of Hanukkah. Hanukkah does not have a lot of laws because there's not much to do with Hanukkah, but the menorah, lighting the menorah, which is a wonderful experience, especially here in Eretz Yisrael, because people light outside, so you walk down a street, and all made from Jerusalem stone, the houses and the glow off the wall. It's my favorite time of year. It's my favorite holiday for so many different reasons, but it's just that light is tremendous.
We might mention that also Hanukkah is the only holiday that we celebrate that is here in Eretz, that happened here in Eretz Yisrael. When you're talking about Pesach, it happened in Egypt. And when you talk about Shavuos, and then it happened in the desert, and when you talk about Sukkot, that also happened in the desert, or when you talk about Purim, that happened in Persia, this happened Nes Gadol Hayapo. It happened right here in Eretz Yisrael.
Exactly, and that's a hugely important point, very important point. It was the only exile that took place in the land itself. All the other exiles, exile usually means you leave the land. We didn't leave the land. The exile was internal in the land itself, and Hanukkah was the redemption from that exile. But, one of the halachas is that for the entire time that the Ner Shechanukah are burning for the sake of the mitzvah, for the sake of the halacha, which basically amounts to about 30 minutes from the time that 3 stars come out. For those who, like earlier, before, around sundown, so a little bit longer, but it has to be able to burn into the night for at least 30 minutes. That's not much oil to be able to do that. And the law is that you cannot get any pleasure. You can't use that light for any personal benefit. You can sit there, you can stare, you can enjoy just by looking at it, but you can't read by it. You really can't count money by it. You can't. It's got to be clear that you're letting this just for the sake of the mitzvah itself. So, in a technical level, that's the reason why. Because we want people to know we're lighting these candles not to light the streets, not because we need to see what we're doing outside or in the dark, but because we're commemorating, and not just commemorating, we're accessing this light of creation. But on a deeper, more Kabbalistic level, what we're doing instead is we're saying that this is a light you can't go to. You want to discover fluorescent lighting, you can do that. You can actively and proactively get up and do experiments and figure out how to make light from gases or from a filament, right? And you can figure out how to harness the light of the sun. Anyone can do that. You just need the brains and the capacity to do it. But no one says, wait a second, are you a righteous person? If you're not righteous, you can't do that. No, anybody can do it, right? But not the Or HaGenuz, not the hidden light of creation. It chooses you. It's got to come to you. That's what the halakha is telling you. You can't go after it. It has to come to you. But how does it come to me? So when you prove yourself to be a worthy container for this light, a worthy conduit for this light, it will flow through you. And that's why it's so important to learn Torah. And that's why it's so important to work on your character traits. Not just because you'll get a better portion that will become, not just because you'll be a nicer person, hopefully, but because this is the way you access this fantastically amazing light that allows you to see from one end of the world unto the other end of the world, among the many, many, many benefits. But you have to become first the container. So the Pri Tzaddik, Rav Tzadok Cohen says, that's what the first 24 days of Kislev are for. but to clean out, take out the garbage, so to speak, to clean out the mess, to make yourself pure once again. That when that light comes down on the 25th of Kislev, when Hanukkah begins, you are already that container. If you're only going to start working on it during Hanukkah, if at all, like every other year, Hanukkah will come and go. So that's the beginning of the discussion. God willing, we'll talk a bit more about this in the upcoming parsha because it's very much tied to the weekly Torah portions.
If you have time for a quick question, we have a question here from YouTube. It's actually a double question from John Kenneth Stava. The Eternal One is light, though he created darkness too. Why? And he continues on and says, light compared to darkness, what happens when light enters darkness?
Well, I mean, when light enters darkness, we see that the darkness dissipates and goes away. But, Kabbalah explains that, in a sense, it sounds like an oversimplified explanation, but this is Kabbalistic, that just like you have to have evil to be able to appreciate good, and certainly for the sake of free will, you have to have darkness to be able to appreciate the light, to be able to understand what's missing. And if it wasn't for free will, now, for example, the world to come, there'll be no darkness. There'll be no night in the world to come. Just all light. Why? Because at that time, there'll be no free will anymore. Without free will, there's no need to do anything. It's just a time to bask in that light and enjoy and be rewarded for all the effort we've made. But this period of history right now is a period in which we have the opportunity to make free will decisions to bring light into the world. In order to be able to do that, there has to be darkness. So therefore, God created the reality of darkness, what it is exactly, and so we can then bring light to it and push the darkness away. Interesting enough, is the word for evening is erev, and the rabbis explain it's erev because it's really from the word tarovis, which means a mixture, because darkness is really a mixture of light and dark. The only time that it became pure darkness, they say, was during the plague of darkness in Egypt, where God extracted all the light from the darkness that was supposed to be for the Egyptians and gave that to the Jewish people. So they had double the light, while the Egyptians had double the darkness instead. And that's why they couldn't move. That's why they were frozen by it. It was an awesome darkness that none of us have ever really experienced in our lifetime until this very day.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And we hope to continue next week with another preparation for Hanukkah. We have another couple weeks to go, and to talk about this amazing light. Thank you again, Rabbi Winston. Again, this webinar is live, and it is sponsored by bringthemhome.org.il, which can also be found at israeltorah.org, and as well as on istimetolive.com. We also have we do this in coordination with Israel 365, so we appreciate their sponsorship as well. Thank you very much, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.